really need to build something out within a schedule. There's still a few more people to jump on, so I will give them just a few more seconds here, and then we'll jump into the actual meat of the presentation. Okay, let's begin. So as I just mentioned, the agenda here, we're going to go through some workflow and best practices. We're going to focus a little bit on the Gantt chart within the schedule, and again, talking a little bit about some quick tasks. If you have any questions during the session today, please feel free to type them within the chat area within the GoToMeeting panel, and Leanne will be there to answer any of your questions, as well as we'll take some time throughout the session to bring up any of these questions that we may feel will be a benefit to the general audience. Okay. So what you can see now is I've just logged into what we have as an internal demo system. And what I've done is I've gone in and created an estimate. And from that estimate, I've turned it into a schedule. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the schedule. And most of you, I'm assuming, has some knowledge of the system already. For those of you who are beginners, this may be kind of a step forward, but generally we start from the estimate phase. We turn that estimate into a job, and from there we find the schedule. So I'm going to pull up the job first and foremost. And then I'm going to navigate to the submenu bar here and click on the Schedules tab. Now what you can see here, these are the items, the internal services that I pulled through from the estimate phase. So whenever we build out a schedule, anything that we enter into the estimate from an internal services perspective will then be pulled through into the schedule to give us ability to task those out to the individuals within our organization responsible for those specific services. So I've taken the liberty of going ahead and doing some of the assignment already, but I will also kind of touch upon how to make some of the assignment changes. The first thing I'll point out here, down the side, you'll notice at the very far left-hand side, you'll see some of these gray dots. What you can do is sometimes when you pull something in from an estimate itself, it doesn't bring the services in the actual order that you wish to task them out to. And if you're looking at doing something like dependent tasks, which means one task needs to finish before the other one can start, you may want to take advantage of these little gray dots here by moving these around on the schedule. Okay? So there's no impact to anything else on the estimate by changing these around. It's simply just to put them in the order that you need them to occur. So because I've already set the dates, I'm going to go and shift this back up to the top. Perfect. And as you can see, the by column here is coming in from whoever is going to be creating the estimate. It'll automatically default to that individual's name. And then obviously here, you'll be able to assign to the individuals within your organization whose names will appear in this to list. The start date and end dates have also been populated, but what you can do if you need to make any changes to those, you can simply click on the start date, pull up the calendar, and alter the date to whichever it needs to be. Okay. The other thing I need to point out, and this is something that gets brought up quite often, is sometimes people are claiming that they've created tasks on a schedule and they've assigned them to certain individuals, and then as they're trying to follow up on the status of these tasks, they notice that these individuals are claiming that they never received a notification. So 9 times out of 10 when we come back and we view the schedule, it's because the status has not been changed out of the draft status to either assigned or in progress. If you're assigning tasks to anybody and you do not happen to put them into this in progress status or the assigned status, these will not appear on the individual's dashboard. And just to clarify, if you jump back into your main dashboard, and you can do so by clicking on your company logo or by coming up here to the dashboard here, all tasks and to-dos, provided you have not changed the outline of your dashboard, will reside within this tasks and to-dos panels down here. Okay? So anytime that you're assigning tasks, whether it be from this quick task or from the schedule, they will come in under this tasks and to-dos panel. So let me jump back into the schedule here. Great. Leanne, how are we doing? Is there any questions so far?
It sounds great, Jess. I don't have any questions so far, so if anybody does have anything, please feel free to send it across to us.
Excellent. Thank you. Another couple things I'm going to point out to you is a lot of times people say to us that, you know, we bring in one service item like research, but really it involves 3 different people to do the research. So then how are they going to kind of accommodate those 3 separate tasks? The easiest way to do that is by actually copying the task out. So if you just click on the little arrow beside that specific service and you click on copy tasks, what you'll see is it just replicates the title, but you can change this to whatever you want. So you can change this to research 2, whatever that may be. And also you have the opportunity to use this description column to add any additional information that may benefit that individual who's actually responsible for completing this research part. Okay, and that could be things like just some added direction, maybe some specific requirements from the customer, that type of information. You'll notice in this particular schedule, this is pre-populated, and that's because we did that in the estimate phase itself. But if you don't happen to populate that information there, you can do so by coming directly into the schedule. Okay, you'll also notice when you copy the task that it automatically defaults to the service group and service, and it'll also replicate the individual who did the assignment as well as who it's being assigned to. So keep that in mind, as it may be a different person that you're wanting to assign the part 2 or the part 3 to, as well as altering the dates. It's likely that they may work on things at the same time, or it may be worked on in a different time frame. So we want to make sure that we adjust that as well. So I'm going to just delete Sean, and then I'm going to add it to somebody else within the organization. We'll pick Thomas. Okay. Now, the other thing I want to make sure that I do is I'm going to change the start date to be that of the 17th, and you'll see the reason for that in just a minute. And we're going to start that on the 20th. We can come back here and click Save Changes. You'll notice right now that we're in what we call the grid view. So there's multiple views, and each view has kind of different functionality. So we're in the grid view. This is where I tend, me personally, to do a lot of my task assignment, the start dates and the end dates, any kind of task copying and any descriptive information that needs to be put in, and that's just a personal preference. But when we jump over here to the Gantt view, some people choose to use this one more because the UI, the user interface, is a little more modern. It's a lot easier to kind of navigate in some areas. So, and the other reason that they like to use this is simply because the dragging functionality. So if you want to change the date, instead of having to go back in and physically clicking on that little calendar icon to actually pick a date from the calendar, you can simply drag the start date and the end date of the task to reflect whatever changes have been made. And I'm just going to push this back because what we want to look at now is actually making these dependent on one another. And the reason for doing this, again, is we want to make sure that the items, first and foremost, are in the correct order, but making tasks dependent on one another kind of helps out a project manager in terms of tracking and workflow. So, for example, if we change this first one into assigned status, and we make the following ones that are subsequently listed in the actual schedule, once this individual has completed their task, it will automatically trigger the next task in line that is dependent to it to move into the assigned status. And this is beneficial so that people are not being inundated with a bunch of assigned tasks in their tasks and to-dos panel and feeling overwhelmed that they have a lot of work when really it's just a difference of dates. So in order to make things dependent on one another, you'll notice that there's a little gray dot at the end of each one of these line items, and you simply drag from the one end to the start of the new task. Now, if I adjust this date to the 21st, and I try to link that one to the task down here, which is starting on November 20th, try that again. You notice how it pops up with a red line. And what this is saying, it's kind of flagging to us that, well, one can't be dependent on the other if the end date of the first one is past the start date of the next one. So you can simply click on the line there and click on the unlink button. We'll drag this back so it has the same start date, and then we can continue to link the tasks together sometimes. Okay, and I'm just going to go through and do this for the rest of the schedule so that I can show you guys if there's a project time change, anything of that nature, and you need to adjust the framing of the whole schedule, how we can go ahead and do that. And last one. Excellent. So now you'll see that all of these tasks are dependent on one another. When we look at the top, we see that this gray bar reflects the start date of the entire schedule and the end date of the entire schedule. So let's say your client comes to you and says, hey, we need to push this out by a couple of weeks. Something's happened on our end, and we won't be able to provide you any resources or insight into the project that you're working on for us. So can we please push this out? Absolutely no problem. We come in here and we just simply drag the bar, And what it will do is, because these tasks are dependent on one another, it will push the entire schedule out by the required amount of time. Okay. I'll just take a pause here. Leanne, is there any questions coming in?
Hello, Jess. Just maybe an opportunity just to explain a little bit of the hierarchy of our system. So, how do schedules connect to jobs, and what are schedules? What do they do? What are they comprised of? Maybe if you can just take a pause and just kind of explain the hierarchy of how things are linked, just a step back, that might be beneficial to the group.
No problem. So as I mentioned kind of earlier on in the call, and some of you may have joined after the fact, but the normal practice within Function Point, and there are a couple ways of doing things. Most people tend to start by building out the estimate first, and this gives them the opportunity to kind of figure out exactly what services they're pulling in based on the requirements they've gathered from the customer. From that stage, we submit the estimate to the client. The client will approve it, of course, always. We never want to have a declined estimate. Once that approval comes back into the system, we then turn that into a job. And what that means is turning something into a job makes it a live piece of work. And that gives us the ability to start tasking out these specific service items. From that point, this is when we want to add a schedule. And then this is when we're actually saying, okay, this project is now in play and we need to start tasking this out so people can begin to work on it. And obviously from the estimate phase, we're going to have decided on the timeline for the schedule, meaning when is the project due to start and when is it supposed to be finished, based again on the client's requirements. Now, there are certain scenarios where people are a little unsure what they need to pull in, and they need to look at it from a timeline perspective prior to actually building out the estimate. In order to do that, you can actually start from a schedule itself and clicking on Add Schedule. If there are templates that you're using, you can select a schedule template from this area here. Otherwise, you want to just give this a name. And then you want to assign it to the company that you're going to be working with. Managed by is going to be whoever kind of the AE in the system would be, whether it's the project manager or the sales rep, depending on what your company's practice is. And then you can click on Save. Now what this does is it gives you a blank slate to start from. So from here, you can begin adding certain tasks. You can begin populating things like research, that type of thing. And then from this point, you can build out your schedule, build out the timelines. And then once you've done that, set the dates, created everything that you need to create from a schedule perspective, you can then add an estimate and job. And what this also will allow you to do is come in similar to exactly what happens from when you're building out an estimate from scratch. It'll allow you to add these tasks to the specific services and service groups that are outlined within your system. Okay? And the same premise for building out the estimate. It's just you're kind of going from the schedule first back into the estimate. Does that help, Leanne?
Yes, thanks, Jess.
No problem. Okay. So we're just going to jump back into here, and there's a couple other things I just want to point out. So I've had recently a few people come to me asking how they can kind of copy group tasks. So when we think of a group, this main kind of heading here, and if y'all don't mind, I'm going to jump back into the grid view. When we look at anything that appears in the gray bar or the dark blue line, this is going to be what we consider to be the service group. So again, the service group is kind of the hierarchy of services. We like to lump everything that's kind of related to creative services within this service group, and then we break it out specifically into the internal service itself. So for today's example, under creative services, we have a research service, we have a sketching and rough service, design, copywriting, and production. So they all fall within this creative services bucket. Now, let's say, for example, we need to add this as another group, meaning that maybe there is 2 separate deliverables or there's 2 separate groups working on things, and we want to make sure that they all have the same kind of task assignment, and to prevent us from having to manually replicate these one by one. If we click on this here, you'll notice that the little checkbox beside the service group itself, it's going to check out everything else within that group. Then we can click on the drop down here, and you'll see at the very bottom it says copy task group. So by doing that, you'll see that it's just replicated everything from above, as well as including the dates and who we've assigned this to. So again, if there are date changes or assignments that need to be changed, you need to make sure that you come in and actually reflect those within the copy. Okay? Any questions out there, Leanne?
Hi, Jess. I do have a really great question. One of the questions was posed not so much about task dependencies, but what if all of the dates of your schedule need to be bumped out? For example, this typically comes up when we're working with schedule templates, for example, and we need to adjust the dates of the entire schedule. So perhaps when they're not dependent on each other. Would you mind addressing that?
Certainly. So that's actually a good segue into where we were going to go. If you ever need to do any kind of bulk editing, and this is kind of what Leanne was alluding to, we can come back here into the old edit view. Now, I will admit that the UI is a little bit, how should we say, historical, archaic, but the functionality within it is awesome. So you'll see that there's this adjust dates button here. So what we can do is we can select the one. So let's just say that it's just specifically to creative services. And I'm actually just going to pick the research one and the sketching and rough drafts. Let's say it's just these dates that we need to adjust. If we click on the adjust dates button, we can say, okay, the start date now is going to be moved from the 23rd to the 27th. And what this is indicating here is that we're not scheduling work days on the weekend. So it's taking into consideration only Monday through Friday, and it's starting from the start of the schedule as opposed to the end of the schedule. Okay? So you simply select the correct criteria, click adjust dates, and then you'll notice it's now moved those dates for the selected items to kind of reflect what we had added before. So it's pushing them out by the requested amount of time. Okay? The other thing I can also point out as well, and I'm just going to uncheck these. Let's say we talked earlier about making sure that the status of draft was moved correctly in order for people to recognize that the tasks have been assigned to them. This is a great option if you are an organization that builds out a schedule and assigns everything all at once. If you come up here, we can click on this, which highlights the whole schedule. And then if you notice within this batch edit bar, we can come over here and change the status to assigned or in progress. And I'll go assigned for today's purposes. And it'll assign everything within that schedule all at once. You can come down here to the bottom and click save and finish. And also by clicking save and finish, it'll remove you from this old edit view and pop you back into the grid view. Okay. Is there any other questions?
You know what? That was awesome. Thank you so much for addressing that. Just maybe a little bit more information, if you wouldn't mind, on how shared tasks work in the system.
Certainly. So shared tasks are ones that some people have a love-hate relationship with them. So let's take, for example, we'll go down to the sketching and rough drafts. If we click on here and we click on an add shared task, what this allows you to do is add multiple people to the same task. So again, similar to what I was showing you earlier about copying out the research task, you can do this for shared tasks, but there are a couple things you need to be aware of. So let's just say, I'm going to, again, what you need to make sure is it's not copying over what the original one was. So we need to make sure that we're allocating it to the right area. So I'm putting sketches, rough drafts. It's obviously pulling in this name of Beth because this is the individual who created the schedule. We need to now select the multiple people that we want to assign this task to. So we'll assign it to Beth, to myself, and Caitlin. And then we can go ahead as per the normal situation and enter in the dates. And now we need to figure out the estimated hours. Now what's going to happen here is I'm going to put in 10 hours. So most people have the assumption that when they have a shared task, that 10 hours is going to be divided equally amongst the 3 people. And actually I'm going to make it 9 because nobody wants to see wackadoo math on here. Okay, so I've now allocated it to be 9 hours. Now when I come down, you'll see that what's happened is it's multiplied that 9 by 3. And the reason why it's done that is because I'm saying that I'm allocating this time to 3 individuals. So the system is making the assumption that each one of those individuals has 9 hours worth of work. So when you're thinking about how much time in total you want the task to be, you need to consider that that it's going to be multiplied by 3. So what we'd really want to be doing here is just changing this and putting in 3. Because then that way 3 times 3 is 9. And so then this will make more sense in terms of, you know, what is actually going to be tracked. And we'll just change the status on that one as well. So keep in mind, shared tasks are great if you keep those kinds of situations in mind, that making sure that when you're assigning it to multiple people, that the estimated hours is reflecting the total divided amongst those 3 people. Okay. The other thing I'll point out too is I've encountered a lot of agencies that are doing like pieces of work. So let's say, for example, social media posts. So you're doing the same type of work, maybe for retainer-based customers or and even kind of campaigns. You're doing the same type of work over and over again. This is where schedule templates can really come in handy. Let's say this is something that we're going to have to use again, with obviously the exception of the date changes and maybe who we're actually doing the assigning to. If you come up here, we can convert this specific schedule into a template. And what happens is then it allows you to select from that the next time you're building a like estimate. So then you can take this schedule template, apply it, and then it's just simply a matter of changing who it's being assigned to again and the dates. So it saves you from having to type in any kind of descriptive information again, pulling in any kind of additional tasks that you might want to pull in. So it is just more of a time-saving mechanism, but I do find that a lot of agencies will really benefit from this in terms of, when you think about how many you may have to create in one day, minimizing your data entry is going to be very helpful. Okay. Leanne, is there any other questions before we kind of jump into talking about quick tasks? Perfect. So what I'm going to do here is, so again, most people are looking at the schedule as the functionality and the only place for assigning tasks. But let's say you have to assign a task to somebody who maybe you forgot to add it to the schedule, or it's just kind of an ad hoc task. So if we jump back over here to our dashboard, and you come down here to the end under your tasks and to-dos panel. And again, some of you may have a different dashboard. And if you do need to change that at any time, you can simply come up here to the speedometer icon, come down here to customize dashboards, and then the steps are pretty clear in terms of how to build out a new dashboard. But for those of you who are focused on tasks and again, trying to create something quickly, you can simply click on this quick task button. And you'll see here, same kind of idea. It gives you the option to add the task title. So what is this task representing? So this is a good one. Please do your timesheets. We're going to figure out the individual. I'm going to assign it to Leanne because maybe she never does her timesheets.
Hey.
Just kidding. Now, due date and time, pretty self-explanatory. I want to make sure that Leanne's done this by the end of next week. The priority, if it's something that you're needing something to obviously to do straight away, we want to flag it as urgent. If it's low priority, obviously pretty self-explanatory. You make the selection to what you want. Now, if this is a task that's actually associated with a pre-existing kind of job or service within the system, if you click on the Show More button, you can actually pull it into a schedule that might be existing. So let's just see. So there we go, schedule webinar. So that's the one we're just looking at. It's automatically pulling in that job information because the schedule is linked to that job. Now, when we look at the service, it's also showing us all of the services that had been pulled in, A, to the estimate, then B, to the schedule. So now we can assign this. Now, obviously, telling somebody to do their timesheets doesn't really fall in any of these creative services, but just to give you the idea, we're going to just go ahead and add it to production. The start date is going to default to the day that we're actually creating the task, and then we can put in the estimated hours. Now, in this particular situation, just asking her to do her timesheets doesn't really require an hour allotment, but let's say it was something else we've asked somebody to do, then obviously we can put in however long we expect it's going to take. Okay. You'll also see here that if there is a file or something, like maybe there's a graphic that you need that person to view as part of completing that task, by all means, you can upload it there. And we will click on submit. So now what's going to happen is when Leanne logs into her dashboard, it's going to appear under this tasks and to-dos panel. A little bit more about tasks. When we come up here, there's a lot of people that have not seen yet the work planning view. So this kind of also ties into the schedules. If we click on the work planning view, and again, the information within here is basically, because this is a demo system, is not really a true reflection, but it'll still give you an idea of what it represents. This is a great tool for when you're actually kind of trying to plan out a schedule or build an estimate. If you're looking to see who's going to be available and you're looking for individuals that you're going to be assigning the tasks to, you want to refer to the work planning view to see what everybody already has allocated to them. Now, the legend is saying that currently they have 6 hours a day. So, and this is based on what you populated within your work schedule on the back. And that represents the number of hours a day that people are set to be working. So when you see that anything that's kind of in this peach color, it's saying they're fully allocated, meaning that so they've got 8 hours a day already assigned to them. Anything that appears in red, so looking at this here, oh, and this, you're probably wondering why I task myself with all my house cleaning. That was an internal kind of test game that we were playing one day. So, but I really do this without having to task myself. Don't worry. Anyhow, so you'll see that based on the fact that these are all overlapping tasks, so when you see that the assignment dates are going from the 15th to the 17th and how many hours have been allocated to each, what it's saying on these two particular days is that I'm 0.2 hours over allocated. So I've already maximized my 8 hours a day of the amount of tasks that I can take. And at this point, I'm actually over allocated. When you look over here, even though there's 4 tasks assigned to me for this time frame, when I look, it's only 2 hours for this copywriting one. So what that's going to do is it's going to take that 2 hours and break it out amongst the 5 days that have been assigned. Same thing for the rest. That one's 2. So what this is saying is out of the 8 hours have been assigned, it's saying it'll take me about 1.6 hours a day to complete each piece of these over the next 5 days. Okay. All of the ones that are listed in here are in the assigned and in progress status, but you will sometimes see a lot of in the draft status. And that's, again, the reason for that would be people are still in the progress of building out the schedule, but they want to make sure that it's populated within the work planning view. So that way, again, when they're looking forward to future projects and who they can task out, they can automatically make that decision based on the tasks that are in draft status and the ones that have been assigned. Okay. Is there any questions around that?
Do you mind?
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Hello. Can you just show quickly how you got to this work planning view? Someone just wants a review.
Yes, no problem. So if you come over here to this task module, and then we scroll down to the very bottom, and it says work planning view. So you just simply click into that, and there you go. And I will point out too, so if anybody on the line, if they log into theirs and you see like these gray lines that are kind of blocked out maybe during the week, then the reason for that, it might just strictly be because your work calendar hasn't been set up. So if I just jump over here to the admin panel, you'll see under system setup, there's something called the work calendar. There's 2 areas here. So there's office hours. So this should reflect what hours your office is open. So Monday through Friday. Obviously, if you are an agency that does do work on Saturdays and you want people to be able to track time and task things out on Saturdays and Sundays, by all means, enter that hours there. It also gives you the ability to enter any holidays, so any stat holidays or any days that your office will be closed. And the reason why you want to do that is so that it does reflect on the work planning schedule, and then that way you're able to take that into consideration when you're scheduling people out. Now, if you jump over here to the staff hours, this is where you go through each one of your staff members and enter their working hours. If you have staff that are maybe part-time that only work 3 days a week, then make sure to reflect that. So again, when you go into the work planning view, it's going to kind of gray out the days that they're not available. So you'll make sure to not task them anything on those days. Again, it's also good to put in people's holidays. So whatever they've booked off for the year, any kind of personal days, sick days, anything of that nature, put them in here. So then again, they can be populated and reflected back into the work planning view. And if anybody has any questions or concerns, by all means, you can reach out to us at the Success email, and we'll be happy to walk you through it. Excellent. Oh, somebody's just popped up saying, how do you comment to the webinar? If you look down on the side panel here for the GoToMeeting, you'll see that there's a chat down here at the bottom. By all means, you can start typing your questions in there. And that I'll take a little break here. And what I'm going to do is launch a poll. So just to kind of get a little bit of feedback in terms of, you know, how long the people that are listening have been using Function Point. I'm just going to send this out there, and then I will give you guys a few minutes to respond. You guys are very speedy. 75, 76%. Interesting statistics, actually. The majority of people listening have been with us for over a year. So that's great. Okay, just a couple more seconds here. I'm really waiting to see that 100%. We're at 89. Come on, we can do it. And if anybody has any other questions while we're just looking at this poll here, then by all means, shoot them out to Leanne. I want to make sure that I, kind of address everything that you guys may be questioning. If there's anything I haven't covered that you'd like to know about, by all means. But I'll also point out before we hang up today where you can actually go within the system if you're not already aware to find out some additional information, not just in regards to schedules and tasking, but also to other areas of the system. Okay, we're at 95, 96. So that's great. That's awesome. So basically what I'm looking at is we've got about 9% people who are very new to the company, 9% that have been here less than 3 months. We're looking at 34% that have been here between 3 months and a year, and a whopping 47% who have been here for over a year. So again, welcome all of you and thank you all for joining. And I really do hope that these sessions are beneficial. What I'd like to do as well is kind of, show you guys what's coming up in the webinar. But before I do that, in terms of future webinars, I just want to point out again, if all of you will have access to the training site. So this little eye icon represents everywhere in the system that you can navigate. So if we click in here to the training piece, this is where you can pretty much type in anything you wanting to know how to do. So if let's just say, since we're talking about that, creating schedules. And this is going to give you a great kind of step-by-step example on how to navigate through the system. There's some videos that have been included. This one specifically, if we click back, some other template one. We can look up some different things in terms of step-by-step instructions. So here, creating and managing a new schedule. So screenshots and again, very concise information teaching you guys how to do it. Okay. Leanne, any other questions coming in?
I'm getting a lot of really amazing questions, actually. I'm very busy over here. Let me just pick a good one. All of them are very, very good. Let me just see. Just questions about what reports perhaps you suggest for tasks. Anything that you like?
Sure. So, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I tend to kind of utilize the find routines within all of these modules. And the reason for that is it gives you a little more flexibility.
Hey, Jess, just want to let you know your audio is just cut out.
I know it says connecting.
Oh, you're back on.
Hi.
You're back on. Sorry, everybody.
That's okay. So I was just talking to myself there. So let me just jump back here. So let me cancel out of here. I'm not sure when I cut out exactly, but let's just start from the beginning. So one of the great ones for tasking is, as I was saying earlier, that I go through and I find that using the find routines within each of these modules are really beneficial. And again, the reason for that is because it allows you to kind of alter the results that come back. So to get where I am now, if I just click on find tasks, I'm not going to enter any criteria within this task find page because I want to get a full kind of perspective of all the tasks that are in the system. So if I simply come over here and click on find tasks, I start looking at the columns and say, you know what, I'm not really concerned about the variables. I'm not really concerned about the priority, or I'm not really concerned about the company. So how can I change that? You simply come up here to the manage columns, and then I can select. Maybe I'm more interested in saying, well, when was this task created? Because I want to make sure that there's not a big lag time between the creation date and the due date and the time. what was the assigned date, because again, making sure there's no lag time between the creation date and the assigned date. Maybe I'm also interested to know if there's a schedule associated with this. So then you can click on that as well. The other benefit is being able to drag the order in which these appear. So if you don't like how it's come out and you want to have a different kind of visual, by all means drag these around so they'll appear just as you want them to be. Once you've made all the changes, you can simply come down and click on Save Columns. And then you also have the ability to export this in a CSV. So if we're taking all data, it's going to pull all this information in. And then again, similar to any other kind of Excel document, you can then manipulate the data within the Excel document itself. One other one, if you're looking for specific ones, if we click back into this task module and we go down to tasks and to-dos, this is where you can start looking at things based on specific staff members. So if you're looking at things assigned to specific staff, you can select one individual, or simply by clicking the shift button, you can select as many people as you want. And then what this is going to do again is it's going to show you the percentage of the completion. So how much time was estimated, how much time has actually been tracked, and how far they off of the mark of actually completing it. Any other questions, Leanne?
Not yet. Thanks, Jess.
Excellent. So I apologize for the audio cutting out on us there. Okay, so any questions? And then I'm also just going to populate this for you, or pop this up for you guys too. So if you ever want to learn a little bit more about it, you can go to FP Help, and this is where you're going to find some skill development, tools and resources. There's a community forum. And one thing I'll also point out to you is we are always looking for customer feedback. So for those of you, and it falls into any kind of bucket, whether you've just started with us or whether you've been working with us for a long time, we appreciate feedback in regards to anything in the system, whether it's positive, negative, it really doesn't matter. You guys are the ones that kind of help us design our product. So if we're not hearing from you, we don't know what we need to improve and what we don't. So I would appreciate any of you that have any kind of questions, concerns, feedback, comments, whatever it may be, take the time and put that in there so then we can actually analyze it, view it. And that is really the only way you're going to see a lot of new functionality or progress within the program itself. Okay. And then the next session that we're going to be hosting is on November 29th, and that's going to focus around project management and task reporting. So by all means, check out the website and you can register for that webinar there as well. That'll be led by my colleague Laura, and she's really great and knows a lot about these topics as well. Okay. Any other questions before we wrap up for the day, Leanne?
I do have quite a few questions that have been coming through. I'm going to stick around after the webinar. I'm going to continue to answer them, and anything I don't get to, I will have the dedicated customer success manager reach back out so that we make sure that all the questions are answered.
Excellent. Okay, well, I really appreciate everybody joining today. And like Leanne said, keep the questions coming in. If you know who your customer success manager is and you have any questions as a result of today's session, please feel free to reach out to them directly. Otherwise, again, feel free to reach out to the support. And then we hope that you all log in and join us again for the webinar coming up on the 29th. Thanks very much, everybody.